Hello watch enthusiasts! Now women's watches are under-discussed, I feel, in the watch industry, and amongst brands as well as journalists and people speaking about watches. Because I feel this is an area where watchmaking is somewhat abandoning half of its market. And this is because for a great deal of women's watches they're produced to relatively poor value as a result of having less expensive quartz movements inside them, or being fashion watches which simply aren't made to be high quality. Similarly, it's often seen that there are affordable women's watches, but also extremely expensive women's watches with no real middle ground as a result of brands simply not putting the time into women's watches as they do into the men's ranges. And so in this video I'd like to speak about women's watches that offer you luxury quality, but also wonderful value in terms of what you're getting, the quality of the product, and also the elegance of it as a whole, which should fit with every necessary need, whether it's a dress watch, an everyday watch, even a dive watch. And these do appeal to different categories and different price ranges, but I think all offer very good value and a very attractive product as a whole. Of course, before I begin the video, I would like to encourage you to like, share and subscribe if you do enjoy this video and find its content useful. Also, do follow me on Instagram at the address which is now on the screen to see more content which you wouldn't otherwise see on the channel, whether it's a preview of a review or additional content where photography is concerned. Now, the first watch I'd like to speak about is in theory a man's watch. However, due to its small size and also the fact that this watch has such a pure aesthetic, it's about as unisex as a watch can get. And this is the Junghans Max Bill manual wind, and it's a piece which is 34mm in diameter by only 9mm thick, despite having a very heavily domed crystal. And this piece is a fantastic option if you're looking for a watch which is subtle, refined and understated with a very interesting history, as it was designed in 1962 by Max Bill, the famous Swiss architect, artist and designer. And this really epitomises the Bauhaus clean watch, especially with that thin manually wound ETA 2801-2 inside, which gives you a very respectable 42 hours of power reserve, running at 4 Hz, giving you that smooth tick to the second hand, and of course having a manual wind setup, which means that it makes the watch much more slender, but also allows you to engage with the watch each morning, or every few hours, when you wind up the watch. And this is a watch which comes with a variety of different dials, whether one goes for a grey dial, a silver dial or a black dial, each with different layouts with either indices or these particular numerals running around the edges of the dial. These are quite wonderful pieces to behold, and very clean and very subtle in their aesthetics. There is also a small amount of lume on the dial to allow these watches to be used in the dark, and so they make fantastic everyday pieces because at £620, despite being a tad more than most fashion watches, they will offer you years of enjoyment and very high quality. And with this watch's very heavily domed plexiglass crystal, it gives a distinctly vintage look, but nonetheless with its simple and clean lines, has a very neutral but extremely good looking aesthetic, and despite the fact that it's only splash proof, it should be suitable for everyday wear without any sort of trouble whatsoever, with an accurate Swiss made movement of course, and a German made build. And so this watch comes either on a leather strap or a Milanese mesh bracelet, either way being an attractive watch, and really appealing to someone who wants something for everyday wear with elegance and a very delicate look, but also with very high quality and very good value. Where more elegant and more refined pieces for women are concerned, such as models like the Cartier Tank for instance, or the JLC Reverso, which have really become classics of women's watches, prices can be incredibly high for movements which don't necessarily offer a great deal. This is the case, for example, with the Cartier Tank, where even a quartz version will set you back £2,000, which is rather a lot of money for a watch which doesn't have the horological sort of nature to really justify this price. And so I think a wonderful alternative for under £2,000, which is of course very much in the realms of luxury watchmaking, but does fit into a more affordable budget for a watch to be worn every day as well and to really be enjoyed over so many years that the price is justified, one has the Nomos Tetra manual. And this is the 29.5mm version, because they do make a version which is a little bit narrower. However, this version doesn't offer you the exhibition case back, which I think would be a real shame to miss. Now this watch follows a very clean aesthetic, with its 29.5 by 29.5mm stainless steel case, which gives you this square form. Now this watch will wear a little bit larger than its size suggests because of its square shape, as a result of being a bit of a different wear on the wrist to a standard circular watch, but nonetheless will be extremely wearable for the vast majority of smaller wrists, as well as larger ones if you do enjoy having a smaller watch. However, for a lady's wrist this watch will be more suitable. Also, it has these lugs which are ridged, but really more than ridged, because one has these two forms united to form these incredibly elegant mid-century looking lugs, which give you a very short lug-to-lug length, but also make the watch very comfortable on the wrist, whilst not having any concern with regards to the strap choices for this piece. The case is of course stainless steel and is polished as per Nomos' usual way, and features some curves on its bezel which, whilst square in its form, is curved downwards around the case to soften its shape, whilst the crown protrudes at 3. The watch has a sapphire crystal on the front, and the versions of the dial do come from the standard Nomos sort of catalogue of designs with very clean aesthetics, but now in more playful colours. Because aside from the traditional white with heat-blued hands, one also has brighter, somewhat pastel colours, with the grenadine version with gold-plated hands, which also is the pearl version, which also shares those gold-plated hands, whilst the matcha green version has rhodium-plated hands, and the azure-dialed version has green hands altogether. And so one gets these different touches, whilst the square nature of the case is echoed on the more regimented, one could say, white dial version thanks to a square subdial for the seconds, whilst all other versions have a much softer circle. And so with coloration they're able to play with this watch as a stylistic choice which is both modern and vintage at once, with also a beautiful selection of straps. Now the watch has a wonderful movement as well, because its movement is beautifully decorated behind the 380M rated caseback to give you a certain amount of splash-proof water resistance. On the caseback you have two options, either the solid caseback, which is a standard feature for this watch, but means you can't see the movement, though you can have a personal engraving put on the back, or alternatively you can have the exhibition caseback, which gives you a wonderful view of this Nomos Alpha caliber, which is a nicely striped and very beautifully decorated movement, which is manually wound so you can see all of its workings, as well as having blued screws and just general decoration on this 43-hour power reserve movement, running at 3 Hz, so that's 6 ticks per second, with 17 joules and small seconds of course on the dial. And this is based on an older movement, the PIS 7001, but it's a very serviceable movement, and a beautiful one at that, which I think really deserves to be seen. And so whichever version of this watch you go for, it offers excellent quality, as well as a unique design which will fit the vast majority of wrists extremely comfortably, but also give you the best of both worlds in terms of being an incredibly elegant watch, but also much more playful than other options on the market, and very good value for what it offers. Many looking for a luxury women's watch won't necessarily be looking for a dress watch, and so I think this Rado Hyperchrome Captain Cook Automatic, which is new for 2019, is a wonderful option. And whilst this watch is aimed normally at men, I think with its 37mm size, it's an interesting option because, unlike other dive watches in smaller sizes, this gives a much more playful aesthetic, a design which is much more fun in my eyes, and at least a design which offers a much more versatile appeal. Because this watch is based on a watch from the mid-century produced by Rado, but I think this watch as a package which comes with additional straps, a case for the watch, as well as a very interesting movement, is really a fantastic option. Firstly, I think the design of this watch is just fantastically well judged. It has a beautiful stainless steel polished case, which is of course 37mm in diameter, making it rather small for a dive watch, but fully wearable on a smaller wrist, whilst it also is 11.1mm thick, making it quite slender despite its rather unusual bezel assembly, which is concave, so the edge of the bezel is actually higher than the middle, which allows the watch to take on this dish shape to its front, which is offset by the beautifully bubble-domed sapphire crystal on the front of the watch as well, which allows the whole watch to take on this very heavily curved form on the front, which I think is extremely charming. Of course, the watch also has a new dial for 2019, and this watch is being made in a limited run of 1967 pieces. The dial of this watch is this bronze sort of colour, which is offset by the silver hands, as well as that ring around the edge of the dial, and the red colour to the date wheel. One also has interesting features such as the rotating anchor for the Rado logo, as well as the fact that the hands are extremely legible despite their old-fashioned style, thanks to large amounts of luminova being applied to them, as well as to the dial itself. And despite this more playful aesthetic, this watch does retain certain diving credentials which do make it a very reasonable option for a sports watch, in the sense that this watch allows 100 metres of water resistance thanks to its crown assembly and its general case build, as well as the fact that the luminova on the dial will make it very usable at night. And I think as a general package for the price of this watch of £1,900, it offers a great deal, with a full case for the watch, with a travel case, if you will, in leather, as well as a NATO strap to match the watch, a mesh bracelet to give it a more lustrous look, and a leather strap to give it a more distressed or vintage look. I think it's a fantastic package. But really what sets this watch apart from its key competitors, such as for example the Oris Diver 65 at its 36mm size, is the fact that this watch has an ETA C07.611 inside it. And this is a movement which is a play on the ETA 2824, but I think offers a more functional product, because it gives the same 25 joule setup, except it reduces the beat rate to 3 Hz, giving you 6 ticks per second instead of 8, but increasing the power reserve to 80 hours, meaning that you can put the watch down, despite the fact that it's automatic, for the weekend for example, and pick it up on Monday morning. It'll still be running just fine, which is a fantastically useful element to a watch like this, where otherwise it would run down with a shorter power reserve. And so for someone who wants a more sporty watch than the ones I've previously shown, this is a very interesting option for a luxury piece which will last the test of time, but also provide you with something very different on the wrist, and something which I feel is very, very good value. Now this penultimate watch in the video is more of a response to a bestseller in the women's watch market than anything else. Because whilst one's led to believe that Rolex Daytonas and Submariners are the biggest sellers by Rolex, one has to be led to believe that in truth it's women's Datejusts in steel and gold which sell the best. And the reason for this is just simply the number one sees out in the wild, that one simply sees far more of these two-tone women's Datejusts than anything else. And their popularity has made them an absolute classic for a watch which is wearable in pretty much every sort of setting or at any sort of occasion. And I think Tudor offer a very interesting alternative which offers you better value for a start, but also a watch which is even more versatile in my eyes. Because this is the Tudor steel and gold version of the 32mm Black Bay. And the Black Bay has become a real staple of the Tudor line, with a high water resistance and this pseudo dive watch style. But with these rotating bezel-free models, such as the 32mm model, one gets a piece which offers you all the elegance you would expect from a Rolex Datejust, or in this case, since it has no date, more of a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, with a higher water resistance, as well as a build which is both more affordable and more robust. Because this watch is, as the name would suggest, 32mm from side to side with a mostly stainless steel case, which is finished extremely well, with polished sides to the case as well as these beautiful bevels and brushed elements on the top. In addition to that, one has this golden coloured crown and this solid gold bezel which is brushed on this watch to be a bit less ostentatious than a polished one, and these solid gold centre links to the bracelet which run along this Jubilee style of bracelet which is typical of the Rolex and Tudor group. And despite this watch's rather dressy characteristics such as those golden features and the smaller 32mm case, this watch still offers 150 metre water resistance, making this watch perfectly suitable for swimming, and in theory one could also go scuba diving with this watch, although of course it's not necessarily advisable. This watch would certainly be fine. Because with its sapphire crystal on the front and its screw-down crown, this watch is a real multi-purpose watch, which is really what Rolex and Tudor were known for. And the price of this watch is much more affordable than the equivalent Rolex Datejust, coming in at around half the price, because this watch is £2,820, which is a fair lot more than one would expect from an all-steel model from Tudor, but nonetheless this watch does have the gold elements in it, so inevitably the price is going to be higher. And the dial comes in two versions, either a matte black dial, which is the more traditional, more classic look for the watch. However, if you want something which is more dressy, as opposed to a slightly more sporty dial, you can go for this sunburst champagne golden colour, which I think is a fantastic look and one which really suits this watch. Inside this watch one finds the ETA 2824, albeit built to Tudor standards, and whilst this is very much an industry standard movement, with a 38-hour power reserve running at 4 Hz with 25 joules, and of course it's an automatic movement with hacking and hand winding as well, this movement is perfectly suitable for this watch, will offer you much more affordable servicing than would be the case with an in-house movement, and also is in truth on par with the equivalent Rolex movement in the equivalent women's Datejust or Oyster Perpetual. So really I wouldn't view this as a downside, but rather a feature of this watch which allows it to be more accessible in terms of price, but still maintain a certain level of quality, with the only difference really in terms of daily use to the Rolex movement being the fact that this isn't chronometer certified. These movements aren't chronometer certified, although the fact that these movements are prepared by Tudor will mean that they're already of a very high standard, and quite frankly, it shouldn't make too much of a difference to daily wear, or make this anything like a large downside. And so for someone who wants something which is classically correct for a women's watch, and something which is very versatile for everyday wear, and really will be a fantastic piece to have for the rest of one's life, for example, this is a really phenomenal option. Of course the price is a bit higher at £2,800 or so. I think it is still a very good option, and a very sound choice. Now the final watch I'd like to speak about is a model which offers in my eyes the greatest balance of modern crisp aesthetics with classical charm through its design and its general build, as well as absolutely fantastic quality and one of the best movements you could possibly expect at any price range really, which is something which I think Omega have really been getting right in recent years. And so this is a variant of the Omega Seamaster, which is the Aqua Terra 150mm 38mm, and this is the women's version. Now they do also offer the 34mm model, however I feel that because this watch has such slender lugs and such an elegant design, as well as having a more complex dial with more detailing and I think a generally more attractive aesthetic, the 38mm version does offer better value as a whole product, and I think will suit more people. And the versions of this watch which I'm focusing on are the models in stainless steel and the versions in stainless steel and Sedna gold for the bezel and crown. And the reason why I would focus on these is because the solid gold versions are firstly extremely expensive, but also feature a great deal of jewels on the bezel as well as the dial, which I think compromises the design of the watch and makes it far less versatile than the versions with superluminova instead. And so this watch is very much an outdoor and everyday sort of piece, because it offers 150 metres of water resistance with a screw-down crown, and of course with its domed sapphire crystal, which is anti-reflective on both sides, it's incredibly legible. Naturally, the dial is laid out in a similar way to a normal Aqua Terra, with luminous markings which are applied to the dial in either white gold or Sedna gold, as well as matching hands. And it should be noted that one also has this rather beautiful applied logo, and Omega have put a certain amount of effort into the design of this dial to give it this aquatic theme, with these waves seen running across the dial whether you go for the blue dial or the various cream or silver dials which are available, and whilst those individual markers are conceived to look like the hull of a boat. To give the dial further balance, the date is placed at 6, and I think the elegance of this watch is fantastic either in steel or in two-tone, because one has this smooth bezel as well as these twisted lugs which give a very elegant form to the case, but a soft one which is still very crisply defined by those sharp edges. And whether you go for this watch on a leather strap with a deployant clasp, or you go for it on a full metal bracelet, this piece has a wonderful exhibition caseback showing the caliber 8800 inside it. And this is a movement which has been developed in recent years by Omega to be really the ultimate movement in terms of what you could need every day, because it has a 55-hour power reserve with only one single barrel for the spring in this watch, as opposed to the two which one sees in the larger movements they make, but still offering a perfectly respectable power reserve which will be very helpful, as well as using that famous coaxial escapement, which reduces wear within the escapement and is a very clever innovation of watchmaking. Whilst this watch is also automatic, of course, and is rated as a master coaxial chronometer. And what this means is that the watch is rated to be able to take 15,000 Gauss of magnetic field before any sort of change in the timekeeping occurs, which is really beyond anything any other brand is offering at the present time, which I think is fantastic to see and really is a feature which is specific to Omega, and I think wonderful to see them innovating with. And so it's undoubtedly true that this watch is a significant investment, and certainly is a large amount of money. However, I feel that, along with the other watch in this video, at its particular price point it offers a fantastic quality watch with excellent value for money in terms of features and in terms of the quality which really will last and is made to last, as far as luxury women's watches go. And so I'll conclude this video here, but do tell me in the comments down below what you thought of the video, and do please like, share and subscribe if you found it useful and interesting. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, out.